All right. It looks like we're going to go live. Hello, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from Jerusalem once again. And I'm going to I got a lot to talk about today and some really good videos you're not going to see anywhere else. So you're going to want to watch this. But first of all, our sponsors, the Wellness Company, I'm going to be talking more about them in just a minute. You can find out more about them by going to twc.net/hotzone and put in code HOTZONE and you'll get a discount there. But we'll talk about that more in just a second. So let me see if I can get up here to my right camera. Hi. Uh, we've had a busy day and a very productive day here. First thing I'm going to show you is a stand-up that I filmed, or just a little video I filmed up along the Syrian border. So Oscar and I drove up right up to the Syrian border in the Golan Heights and talked to some Druze guys up there, and then learned a little bit about what was going on. And here's a little bit about what we saw. So check this out. So those white buildings behind me are actually on the Syria side of the border. So again, just about half a mile from where I'm standing. And that is a United Nations camp for a United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, UNDOF, that's been there since the 1970s. And they're an unarmed group of UN observers that is supposed to be enforcing a ceasefire and the buffer zone between Israel and Syria. Now, they've been spectacularly ineffective for the vast majority of their history. There's about 1,200 UN troops over there right now, again, unarmed. They have been very critical of Israel even being here. And as a matter of fact, there have been times like between 2013 and I think 2018 when they had to abandon that base because they had so many of their guys getting kidnapped by the Al-Nusra Front and Hezbollah. And so they moved across and were staying in Israel for a time, even though they have been, I would say, for the most part, fairly hostile to Israel, although Israel coordinates with them when they do patrols and things like that. Now, those guys burn through about $60 million a year, and that's their budget. But 27% of that is pretty much funded by the United States. There are no U.S. troops over there. These are troops from India and Fiji and Ireland and places like that. But suffice it to say, it's another one of those UN boondoggles. It's especially useless now because the Israelis hold all of the territory around it, including up to 15 kilometers inside Syria. So there's not really any reason for the UN to be there, but they still have their little camp there and they're spending their money and doing a whole lot of nothing out here in the Golan Heights. The town of Quneitra is a ghost town. It's been empty for years. And so it's been a hotbed for terrorism and people firing mortars and rockets and drones across here into Israel. That has happened many times. And again, right next to the UN camp, and they can't do anything about it. So one that sort of begs the question of why in the world are we funding the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force? I'm just seeing if you guys are paying attention. That's one way to get you to light up the chat, isn't it? Okay, so we went up to uh, the border there. We talked to these Druze guys that were selling. I bought some honey from one of these Druze guys. It's got the honeycomb in it and everything. It's good honey. He also sold me some zatar, which is my favorite little spice to put on eggs in the morning. It's we call it the dust of my people, and uh, it's I don't know what's all in it, but it's good. Anyway, those Bedouin guys, I'm sorry, not Bedouin, those Druze guys that we were talking to were from the village of Majd al Shams. And if you have been following this conflict for some time, you might recognize that name because that's the village where a Hezbollah rocket fell, I think back in January, maybe, or earlier this year, December, perhaps. And it fell on a soccer field and killed like 22 kids. And those Druze, obviously they're Sunni Muslims. Now, I mean, they consider themselves Muslims. I don't know if all the Muslims consider them Muslims because they have some kind of weird beliefs, but uh, without a doubt, those guys are much friendlier to Israel than your average run-of-the-mill uh, Arab Muslim. When the Druze live in Israel, they have a pretty good life, and they have their own villages and they keep to themselves. They speak Arabic and do their thing, but they vote, they serve in the army, they're functioning members of society. There's, I don't think, ever been a terror attack perpetrated by a Druze. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I seem to remember being told that one time. Uh, so the Israelis like the Druze and they want to have them around. Some of those same guys that we were talking to when we were up there today decided they wanted to go into Syria. Whoop. Something happened to my camera. It got disconnected. Decided they wanted to come into Syria. So and this is just this afternoon, they broke through the fence into Syria from Israel, these Druze guys. And I don't know what, I mean, the IDF was like, whoa, hang on, wait, no, wait, stop. You can't do that. So the IDF has been scurrying around the border area there, trying to round up all these Druze guys who were marching in to help their brethren fight the bad guys in Suwayda. So I'm going to be talking about what's going on in Suwayda. Let's see if I can get my camera back up and running. There we go. Very interesting times in Syria. That's the kind of understatement. I just got off the phone before this hit with a guy who's in Suwayda or Suwayda. Now let's look at the map so you can see what we're talking about. Go to the map. Where is the map? Right here? Yeah, there's the map. Okay, so check out the map here. We are over here in Israel. Here's the Sea of Galilee right here. And then this dotted line represents the internationally recognized border of Israel. This dotted line over here is the actual border of Israel that they have held for many years. And this area in between up here is the Golan Heights. Some leftists around the world and people with the UN try to say that the um, okay, you guys, I just want to make sure you can hear me because there's still some people, I think they're maybe a little behind, who are saying there's no sound. Uh, okay, so all right. So they're just behind. It'll come back. Um, So this area up here, I'll zoom in on it for you, like this. Okay, so this is Golan Heights up in here. And so if you drive up there, you can drive on this road, and you can go. Oscar and I drove right along this road, and we went to Quneitra right here. That's where. So I filmed that stand up from this corner of this road right here. So that's where that video was shot, right there, just across. And this is the uh, now sort of de facto border of Syria. Although, as I explained before, Quneitra is a ghost town, and now the Israelis have pushed about 8 miles further into Syria and are holding another line, and that may be what this line is out here, which is the line that they have taken up to Mount Hermon right there. So this is now the new de facto border of between Israel and Syria. And Israelis live up to this line. So this is a buffer zone in here. Now, where's Suwayda? Suwayda is right here south of Damascus, up in here. No, I'm sorry. It's down in here. It's further down. Okay, so this area is the area that the Druze inhabit. What we've had over the last few days, weeks, is government forces coming from Damascus, again, illegitimate government, driving down this road, and not just, it's more criminality than anything. They're not just uh, coming down and attacking, but they're coming down and robbing people, kidnapping people, detaining people, just basically making a nuisance of themselves down there. So uh, I'm gonna now play for you. First, let's talk about our sponsor. The wellness company, as I said, is uh, sponsoring this podcast, and so I appreciate all of you going to check that out. But what we're talking about today with them, good grief, I got too many buttons going here, is their Contagion kit. Now, there are credible warnings coming out now about man-made biological threats, and it's not theoretical. There are engineered pathogens that could be used to cause chaos all over again. And let's be honest, our government really didn't cover itself in glory last time. So I don't really expect that they would get it right the next time, if you know what I mean. So you probably feel the way I do. And that's why I'm happy to team up with the wellness company, because they've put together this Contagion emergency kit, and they sent me one. It's great. It includes a bunch of different prescription medications like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Tamiflu, and a nebulizer. And it's all designed for early treatment in case another outbreak hits. So it's a good thing to put into your preps and have on hand. So here's how it works. You fill out a quick digital intake form, and your kit shows up in a week or two. That's easy. Done. You talk to them and fill out, like I said, just fill out this form. So don't wait until the government's telling you to shelter in place, or stop the spread or anything like that, um, or tells you what you can and cannot take for whatever comes. So be ready. So go to twc.health/hotzone and use code HOTZONE and save $81 and get free shipping for a limited time. And I know we got a lot of people watching from outside the US. This is available only for US citizens, unfortunately, at this point. maybe they'll expand at some point. But so thank you for visiting our sponsor. All right. So now I want to show you a video that I just filmed a minute ago. I got a chance to talk via Skype to a guy in Suwayda who his name is Shadi, and I quickly translated his Arabic interview into English so that you could hear what he said. And I threw a little B-roll on it. You'll notice some of the B-roll is blurred, and that's just to make YouTube happy so they don't demonetize the video. But take a listen to what he had to say. I think he puts a pretty fine point on it about what's going on in Syria right now.
The background of the event started on Friday night, the 11th of July, when an armed group affiliated with the Bedouin tribes kidnapped a merchant from Suwayda on the Damascus-Suwayda road. He was held for several hours and a sum of money was taken from him, and he was assaulted before they released him. The Damascus to Suwayda road has been recording daily violations against citizens for 5 months, including shootings, assaults, kidnappings, robbery, and sectarian attacks against citizens as Druze. Just a small point, these tribal factions are unofficially affiliated with the Ministry of Defense. The truth of the violations happening today against the people of Suwayda is evidence that this radical regime cannot change and become civil, because it carried the jihadist mentality and the mentality that rejects minority or those different from them, even if they are from the Sunni sect itself. The truth is that the de facto authority is an exclusionary power and cannot execute. The promises it made to European countries and America are contradicted by what is happening on the ground, which goes against all the promises and commitments it made. It is unable to control those groups.
Okay, so that's not the Shadi Kalul that you were thinking, Mama Ressa. That's a different Shadi. That's a fairly common name up there, and that Shadi has some pretty righteous hair, I have to say. That guy's got a hairdo. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm thinking I should probably do my hair that way. That'd be pretty good. So somebody's saying Kim is saying fake. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Uh, Max is saying source. That source is from my computer. I just spoke with that man about, I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour ago. He's in Suwayda and is, you know, telling it like it is out of there. So I talked to a couple of guys that are in Syria, and they all tell me the same thing. That today I talked to them just now. They all tell me the same thing. These guys are putting on a front for the rest of the world, but they are really the Islamic State. And they're even going around with Islamic State patches on their uniforms and stuff. I've seen pictures of that. So take that for what it's worth. All right. You don't think I should have my hairdo like Shadi? I mean, I like Shadi's hair. It's pretty good. Um, so Israel got involved. What he's saying is, Shadi was saying, the government forces started coming down from Damascus, and they were winning. The Druze kind of tribes down there. They just kind of got together and got a few weapons together, and were trying to fight off the government forces, which had tanks and trucks and rockets and all sorts of things. And they were losing, and losing badly. Then the Israelis got involved. And when that happened, at the order of Netanyahu and his cabinet, they ordered the IDF to stop the government forces from pushing further into Druze territory and hurting the Druze more. They want to preserve those guys down there because the Druze basically function like another buffer zone for the Israelis. So the Israeli Air Force went in and started absolutely pounding the uh, government forces taking out their tanks. You saw in that video a tank that was burning, taking out their trucks. There are a bunch of videos coming out of just destroyed military equipment all over the place, and the Israelis turned them back. When they did that, the Druze were able to push back in and retake areas of Suwayda that they had lost. And so now things are seeming to calm down because the government forces have turned around and gone the other way. They realize they can't compete with the Israeli Air Force. Now, this is very interesting because the president of Syria, the new guy, al-Shara, went to Baku, Azerbaijan just last week and met with an Israeli delegation, sat down with the Israelis to talk about how to work together and how to have peace between Syria and Israel. And they floated the idea of even, eventually joining the Abraham Accords and so on and so forth. And again, I don't know how much that's just talk. Probably a lot of it is just talk. However, they were just there sitting down. Now, later on, the Syrian regime came out and said al-Shara was not in any meetings with Israelis, but there's other sources that say, yeah, he was in there. I'm sure he was. So he just went and met with Israelis about how we can all get along, and now they're not getting along so well. So the statements that are coming out from the Syrian government right now on Telegram are getting a little darker, let's say. They're saying things like, "We will defend Syria, from all aggression, with every ounce of blood, that kind of thing, with every weapon at our disposal." So Israel's taking a gamble here. There's no two ways about it. This could go either way. I think Israel is bound and determined that, yeah, if you want to be our friend, if you want to deconflict so that we don't run into each other, if you want to even join the Abraham Accords, that's great. We'll take it. But we don't trust you further than we can throw you. And so we're going to maintain a buffer zone and maintain our own ability to keep our people safe from all the crazies running around in Syria still. Because al-Shara's forces are not made up of like the former Syrian army that they just like, okay, now you work for al-Shara. No, that's not how that worked. The current Syrian government forces are made up of about 25 different militia groups, basically homegrown terror groups and criminal cartels inside Syria. So the ones that are actually fighting with the Druze are a Bedouin tribe, or a couple of Bedouin tribes, that are engaged in smuggling. They're the ones who do all the smuggling of drugs and weapons and people and whatever into Lebanon from Iran. And Israel's like, nope, can't have those guys. So we're going to back the Druze. And they just picked up like, what they say, 3 tons of weapons and explosives out of a cache that they found. I wonder if they're going to turn those over to the Druze and say, here, have at it. That is what they've been doing. That's the model they've been going to now in Gaza. Because one of the things we've been seeing in Gaza is that the Israelis are starting to rely more and more, little by little, on a few Palestinians to work with them and help them get the job done. As a matter of fact, there was a building collapse last week where a bunch of Palestinians were helping the IDF in Gaza to clear out buildings as they were moving through the area. And so they would send these Palestinians and go in there and look around and tell us if you see any booby traps or anything like that, and then we'll come in and diffuse them or whatever. And these guys went into that building, and there was a booby trap, and it blew up, and the building came down on top of them. The Israelis pulled those Palestinians out of that rubble and took them to the hospital in Israel. They medevaced a bunch of Gazan Palestinians straight into Israel and are treating them now because they were working on behalf of Israel. The GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, passing out aid every day, 1.5 million meals inside Gaza. They're making big use of Gazan Palestinians as employees to help them distribute that aid. I don't know how they vet those guys. I don't know how they figure that out. I know the IDF has got a lot of intelligence on the people of Gaza and the people of Syria and the people of Iran, the people of Lebanon, and et cetera, et cetera. They're probably the world's best at human intelligence collection. So they must have their ways of determining whether or not a guy is, has a bent toward Hamas before they hire them. But they are hiring them. And is that interesting to you? I mean, to me, that's like, wow. Now we're moving into a different phase of this war. It's gone on so long that they're starting to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit in Gaza and actually make use of some of these Gazans to help them accomplish their goals. So pretty crazy. Um, Tony Bobo says, why can't the Druze save themselves since there are 700,000 of them? Well, but they don't have tanks and rockets and artillery, and the Shura government does, the GSS does. So they needed help against those heavy weapons. That's why. Uh, Fuzzfire says, do you need a permit or guide to go where you go? No, I don't. I do actually kind of need a permit because if I'm going to be doing journalisming, I I have to have a press card here in Israel. It's easy to get. I just send them fill out a form and send them a picture of my passport, and they issue me a little press card that's written in Hebrew and English that when I get stopped, that's the first thing I pull out and I show people my press card and they take a look at it and they go, oh, okay, you're good. And they let me go. So it's like my ID card while I'm here in Israel. Tucker Carlson, in one of his videos the other day, made the claim that Israel has a complete lockdown on the on journalists in their country, on the news coming out of Israel. I can tell you without a doubt that is patently false. I certainly am able to, go and do the stories I want to do as long as I'm not giving away sensitive information, taking pictures of like military bases or something like that. Um, if there's a missile strike or a terrorist attack or something where indirect fire like rockets or something like that, if I saw a rocket hit a building and I ran over there and filmed it and put it up live on the air, that would immediately give the enemy the ability to adjust fire and shoot again. Oh, we missed what we were shooting at. We just need to go 200 meters this way and shoot again. So that's just a matter of common sense. I've been covering wars for more than 22 years. So I know what I can film and what I can't. It is a delicate business sometimes because tempers run high in war zones, as you can imagine. And I have to be careful. And there are times I get grabbed or get somebody yelling at me or whatever. And there's always a little bit of a tension when I'm trying to do my job like this. Question, has Tucker even been to Israel or is he just a couch pundit? I'm sure he's been to Israel in the past, but that was before he decided that he would rather hate Israel and take the money. Uh, he certainly has not been here during this war. And like Colonel McGregor and the others, he doesn't have any idea what it's like on the ground here in Israel because he hasn't been here. And so that would be the standard that I would encourage you to keep. If somebody's talking about a war and they've not been there, they've not gone to that war and seen that war firsthand, well, you need to at least take that into account when listening to what they have to say. I'm not saying that you should completely disbelieve them, because I've seen quite a few people say things about what's happening over here that they've gleaned off the interwebs that are correct. But like I said, I would I always prefer to go and see it for myself. Then I can tell you the truth about what's happening in the war zone. All right. So, oh yeah, I forgot. We've got questions I'm supposed to be answering. Where do I go get my questions? We have this new system that actually works pretty well. If I would correct, if I would remember to click the link and go get my questions. Uh, okay, no questions right now, Rubina says. All right. Thank you, Rubina. Rubina is great, and she's beautiful, and she's given me grandbabies. I just love Rubina. She is just the most lovable thing. Oh, man. She squeezes my heart. I feel like she's my own daughter. Okay, let's see. PC says, uh, gotta go to Paris, then Tel Aviv. Yeah, PC's on his way over here, I guess. And I would encourage you, if you want to go to Israel, it's a good time to come. I mean, assuming you can get in, because they keep closing down the airport and canceling flights and things like that. Actually, my wife is currently in the air on her way here to come see me. So, uh, okay, Margie, I'll get to you in a minute. Uh, but if you can get in and you've got the time, man, you can have all of the tourist sites pretty much to yourself. Oscar went down today and got to go see the upper room, which is like 300 yards that way, right over there. And he said it was just a room. It was just a big empty room. I said, "What'd you expect there to be?" He said, "I don't know. It was just a big empty room." And I'm like, "Well, they didn't have tables back then. They sat on the floor." And he's like, "Oh, well, there was one other guy in there, and I asked him, to tell me about the place, and he says, well, we think that they had the Last Supper right there. Is that good enough?" And Oscar was like, "Yeah," and so he left. I thought that was amusing, because that guy didn't work there. He probably had no idea. It was just like, this guy was asking me questions. I just tried to give him an answer. So Marjorie asks, I'm still confused about what today's update is about. So I'm just an update on what's going on in here in the war. The big news today is that the Israelis have gotten involved in a much bigger way inside Syria. They've been striking things in Syria off and on since December, or even before that, but big time since December, basically looking for all of the heavy weaponry that was left behind by the Assad regime that is now falling into the hands of the al-Shara regime, and they're destroying all those things. So their entire air force, all their helicopters, every tank they can find. Whenever they see a tank going anywhere, Israel just, yeah, that probably, we don't need any more tanks in Syria. So they just blow it up. They have been taking out some of these smuggling rings that are, Bedouin tribes in there. They've done special forces raids into Syria to break up these rings and arrest people. They have a bunch of troops. They actually, I think today, for the first time since the Yom Kippur War, they hauled a bunch of artillery, Israeli artillery, into Syria. That's the first time in a long, long time that's happened. But I would expect to see more of that as time goes on. So Marjorie, I'm just reporting on is the number one, the uptick of activity in Syria. I haven't gotten to Lebanon yet, but I'll get to that in just a minute. And I've talked a little bit about Gaza, and we'll talk a little more about the Houthis at the end. So I already got the permit question from Fuzzfire. Kimina says, have you ever found out what those lights are behind you? If not, can you please? Yeah, I know. You see those lasers over there? There's some sort of tourist attraction that shoots lasers from way the heck over here, all the way behind the Cassia Hotel here, over to those. You see those buildings over there, and you can see the flickering lights, blue and green, and everything over there. And it's on a timer. It happens every night, even when there was a war on, even when there was nobody on the streets and everything was closed. That those lights still go. So they're just on a timer. And I'm I would like to go see what the actual venue is, but I've never quite been able to figure out what it is. It's just some entertainment thing. What's your take on Trump selling weapons to NATO to defend Ukraine and threatening Putin with stiffer sanctions? It's about time. That's my take, and that's a topic for a different live. I will try to stay on topic here and talk about Israel tonight, but I should do a live about that because there's a lot to unpack there for sure. What's Iran's involvement in Syria currently? Well, Iran still has these militias that are kind of running around Iraq and Syria. One of them just fired a drone at a couple of different oil sites, oil wells or oil facilities in Iraq, one near Erbil and one up in Dahuk. And I've recently been to both of those places. And so these Iranian backed militias are still running around there for sure. But they're probably not getting quite as much materiel from Iran as they were because Iran has lost a whole lot recently. As a matter of fact, Iran just approved a massive, absolutely huge military buildup, something like 40 or 50 billion dollars worth to rebuild their shattered air defense system, air force, and different things, nuclear underground bunkers and all that sort of thing. So I still think it's likely that there will be more violence between Israel and Iran, one way or the other, in the coming days. But uh, obviously, they didn't attack last night. Yesterday's live, we thought they might. There was a lot of rumors flying around here that they might attack. And what I said then was, you know, nobody really knows, but people are preparing for it. So school is still in. The Israeli government has not put out the word to the people to, hey, be careful and stay near your shelters and all that sort of thing. And so that told me that it probably wasn't likely that Iran was going to attack last night. Nothing has changed today, so it's not likely they will attack tonight either. But I think it is increasingly likely that there will continue to be more fighting between Israel and Iran. Oh, one of the things that I put in today's update for CBN that the soundbite was longer than they gave me time for in the update. So I was like, that's one of the frustrations of my job is you get these great interviews and then they go, you can use 12 seconds of that in your package today. And you're like, but there's so much good stuff there. So in Bat Yam, which is south of Tel Aviv a little bit, they had a very powerful missile strike, 2,000-pound warhead that destroyed like 20 buildings. And you'll see that the buildings are not actually completely destroyed. They're still standing, but they're damaged badly enough that it would be easier and quicker and cheaper just to bulldoze them and start over. So that's what they're doing. And they're already getting started rebuilding. And it's only been a couple weeks since the war. So they interviewed one of the workers there, and I just loved what he had to say. Plus, it was in English, so I wanted to play that for you now. Take a listen.
We took a strong hit, but our spirit is strong. Actually, that was the biggest hit, the biggest disaster that the city ever had in nearly 100 years. In one day, we lost 9 of our people, 200 was injured, and more than 2,000, more than 1% of our population are now homeless. They are living at hotels, but we are not looking at yesterday, we're looking at the tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll be here. A lot of new buildings, we're gonna demolish 20 buildings, but we're gonna build them better, stronger, and there will be much more Israeli families running around here, and that will be the best answer to our enemies.
And that will be the best answer to our enemies. I love that. We're not looking at yesterday, we're looking at tomorrow. So that just perfectly sums up the resilient spirit of the Israeli people right there. And so you notice in that video that high-rise apartment building, part of it just got sheared off by the explosion. And there were other buildings around that were shorter buildings, not quite as tall, that had windows blown out and they were destroyed and stuff. So he said that they're going to have to demolish 20 buildings and rebuild those. But there are 2,000 people out of their homes because those high rises hold a lot of people. And there were maybe a couple of hundred buildings that received at least a little bit of damage, broken windows and shrapnel and stuff like that from the missile that hit. So again, that's one of the worst hits. Several people died. I mean, that was one of the strongest, most powerful bombs that Iran was able to land on Israel. And the people are still going about their business. They're going back to work. They're fixing up what was broken and putting their lives back together very quickly. And it shows you just how strong the people are. That was just really cool. I wanted to show you that. All right, now I do have some video of the IDF striking Syria that they put out. I probably should not show this. This will probably get me demonetized, but this is them targeting, military vehicles and such in the area as they were moving down toward Suwayda. And again, there's a lot of video floating around out there. I'll try to put some up over on chuckholton.com that shows ground level effects of that damage. And they wore out the GSS forces today, without a doubt. Overnight in Gaza, the Israelis had 3 more soldiers killed. They were getting very close to the number 500 as in terms of soldiers that have been lost in the invasion of Gaza. Almost double the number of hostages that were taken. I pointed that out before, but man, that again shows you just how high a value Israelis put on human life. They would be willing to sacrifice these soldiers to go get their hostages out, and rightly so. That's what soldiers are for. So send me. There's a lot of guys here in Israel who are saying that. Send me. Okay, so there were more questions. Let's see. I'll go back over to my. Okay. Yesterday, you reported on a possible attack from Iran. Okay, I just got to that. Cat Lady says, don't you think Tucker is lining up with Marxist ideologies or generally leftist ideology? his last speech was actually left. What do you think? Well, yes, I think that there are some people on the right of the right side of the spectrum in the United States who have gone so far right that they've come back around from the left. Like, I guess I never realized that that political spectrum is not just a line, it's more of a circle. Because if you get too far to the right, you start espousing things that the left espouses. And I think that's the case. Now, I mentioned when I did that interview with Yishai Fleischer the other day why I think that is. I think that there's a large contingent of people on the right in the United States who lost a tremendous amount of faith in their government and saw what the left did to people back in 2020. And they got so disgusted seeing how the left just loved to impose draconian measures on everybody else. Guys like Gavin Newsom that were, locking down Californians left and right, but he was going out to dinner parties and that sort of thing. And so people on the right in America got so disgusted by that we have just gotten this allergy now to leftism and leftists anywhere, any place. And a lot of people, when they watched the way that other countries' governments handled that crisis back in 2020, which I cannot name on YouTube, and they learned something about those countries. I mean, I know I learned a lot about Canada, for example. I had no idea Canada was a communist country, but the draconian measures that they took were off the chart. I mean, I just thought, I was like, wow, I thought Canada was a free country, but it's certainly not. Australia, locking people away in concentration camps. That was what we saw in America. And of course, here in Israel, it was pretty bad. So American conservatives looked around the world and were like, we reordered our allies and enemies, or allies and adversaries, based on how they treated their own people. So before that, I would have said to you, if you'd asked me about Armenia, for example, I would have said former Soviet country, still aligned with Russia, probably don't like them. Of course, that was before I ever went to Armenia. But that was the first trip I took after all of that sickness hit. And I got to Armenia and it was like there was no sickness. It was like nothing happened. Everybody was just going about their lives. And I was like, whoa, wow. I mean, it was so refreshing to be in Armenia. And if people want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't. Like there wasn't any, nobody would yell at you if you got on a bus without a mask on. It was just awesome. But then again, this place that I had grown to love for its history treated its people terribly during that whole event. And when I saw that, it made me like just absolutely disgusted with the government here. And there are plenty of leftists here in Israel. So I think a lot of people on the right, like Tucker Carlson, that's the lens that they changed to, and that's all they can see now, is they can only see the leftism. What he would see if he came here and got to know some of these people is that by and large, people here are fairly family oriented, fairly conservative from definitely a fiscal standpoint. Socially, it's a fairly modest country. There's no strip clubs, there's no massage parlors, there's no pornography around here like you see in some other countries. like even Western Europe, right? So again, it all comes down to, do you have the experience of actually going? And I think a lot of people that criticize what's happening in Israel are right to criticize those things that they ascertain to be on the left with the jab and all that kind of stuff. But there's a whole lot more to Israel than that. And if that's all you see, then you're only seeing a very small. It's like you're looking at Israel through a straw, and that's not the right way to do it. Is the IDF doing much in Judea and Samaria? Yes. Novak Custom Harvesting. Thank you for that question. They are definitely doing a lot. As a matter of fact, they just moved a bunch more troops in there after the stabbing attack by the two Palestinian Authority policemen in Gush Etzion last week or over the weekend, I guess. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in there, and they are picking up weapons caches, smuggling attempts, terror cells. They're clearing out areas of Nablus or Shechem, and the IDF is going to town in that area, but that's a much more complex place because they've got a very tough nut to crack in those areas because of course you have Israelis that are living in there and all that. I'm working on a story now, which I'll talk more about not today, but once I get more information on it. There are some news articles that are coming out uh, about settler violence in those areas of Judea and Samaria, where you have Israeli citizens who live legally in in Judea and Samaria, but they get attacked all the time. I mean, by the Palestinians who live there. So they're separated into A zones, B zones, and C zones. We've talked about that a lot. And these guys, they're getting fed up with it, and they can't drive to the store without somebody throwing a rock at them or something like that. And they're getting to the point where when people start throwing rocks at them, they get out and start shooting. And Palestinians have been killed by some of these settlers defending themselves because, a rock is a lethal weapon. Sometimes they're not just throwing rocks. The Palestinians are actually shooting or, ramming attacks and just all sorts of things, knife attacks, stuff like that. So there's a real kind of free floating anger in those areas right now. And I want to get to the bottom of it because there are news reports that there's a Christian village out there where there has been some settler violence, and the news has tried to claim that these are, settlers illegally living in the West Bank that are just randomly going around and attacking Palestinians. I can tell you pretty certainly that is not happening. They're not just randomly going and attacking people for no reason. They are defending themselves and fighting back, and sometimes taking a little bit of vigilante justice. There's your ambulance for the night. Taking a little bit of vigilante justice on some of these Palestinians who are, I mean, there's a lot of conflict in there, and we're going to go do a better job telling that story maybe tomorrow. We'll go do that. Alicia Pellant says, what's your take on Trump selling weapons to NATO? Okay, I already got that. What's Iran's involvement in Syria currently? I got that. I just am rereading all the same. Okay, here we go. Okay. How do airlines not get hit by missiles? Well, the sky is very, very big. That's why. And when missiles start flying, they usually close the airspace so airplanes can't run in there, so they don't run the risk of having an accident where one gets struck. But I mean, it did happen in Iran one time where I think it was a Ukrainian or Russian. No, I forget where the plane came from. but it was shot down by an air defense missile. Have they started building the third temple yet? No. Do you think tourism is getting better in Israel? Not right now, it's not, because after this 12-day war, everybody left. It had been coming back, and there were a lot of tourists here when the war started, and they were all scrambling to get out. I was scrambling to get in. But now, boy, you go to we went to the Church of Holy Sepulchre yesterday. There was like 4 people in there. That never happens. So, yeah, this is a great time to come if you want to come as a tourist. Why doesn't Israel differentiate between Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza? So they do differentiate between, I mean, they still will, if there's somebody with a gun, they're not going to ask him, are you Hamas or PIJ, before they smoke the guy. They're going to shoot first and ask questions later. And there are, one of the reasons why I think that they will never actually get all 20 or so living hostages back is because Hamas doesn't have them all. Some of the other, like PIJ and other just criminal gangs, have them. And in many cases, Hamas can't get their hands on them. So there is a difference, but not really from Israel's point of view. A guy with a gun is a guy with a gun, and they're going to take him out. Porchview Farm says, why isn't the world outraged about the kidnapping of bodies? It's extremely disturbing to me. Yeah, it is disturbing. I'm a little more disturbed about the kidnapping of live people. If I'm dead, go ahead and kidnap me. I don't care. But if I'm not dead, please don't kidnap me, right? In your opinion, Joe Ridley says, when do you think the war will end? You know, I think there's a possibility that it could end this year. I don't think it's going to end in the next month or two, but that's a fool's errand, really, trying to determine that, because if there's anything I've learned in 22 years of covering wars and disasters around the globe, it's that there are 1,000 different things that could happen tomorrow that are not on anybody's bingo card. Nobody can plan for. Nobody had any idea that was going to happen. So it's a fool's errand to try to predict the future when it comes to stuff like that. Somebody in Hebrew says, where are you from, Chuck? You know about Israel more than the Israelis. How come? Well, I've spent about 7 months during the war here in Israel, and that's my job. I've studied it extensively. So I'm originally from Nevada, and then ended up, was in the Army and lived in Texas, lived in Georgia, went to college in Wisconsin, flew helicopters, moved to moved to Washington, D.C., and became a stockbroker for 10 years, and then moved to West Virginia, and then moved to Panama. And now I don't know where I live. My dogs still live in Panama. I don't get to see them very much. I haven't been home in about 3 months or something. And it's going to be another month or so before I even get back to Panama, for sure. More than a month. Susan Elliott asks, has Israel taken Mount Hermon? Yes, they have, and they're going to keep it. They plan to keep it. Stepping into Grace says, do you have information about the young Palestinian American man from Tampa that died in Judea and Samaria last week? The only information I have is that most of what you're reading in the news is spun to make it look like there was a nice little choir boy from Maryland who was, just doing humanitarian work in Judea and Samaria, and a bunch of mean Jewish settlers came and said, aha, an American guy, and they just ripped his arms off and beat him to death. That's not true. But if you read the stories about it, that's what they make it sound like. The truth is probably more along the lines of, this is a kid who came over here to visit family from the States. He's a Palestinian, and who happens to have an American citizenship. He's got Palestinian family here. There was a riot or something along those lines, a riot or a protest. And he went out to the protest and got really belligerent with the IDF, or with the, not the IDF, but with the some of the Israelis who were there, and there was a scuffle, and he fell over and died. I mean, I I think that's much closer to the truth. Now, that is part of the story I'm going to try to do tomorrow. I'm going to go try to find out more about that and get the best answer I can for you on that. But knowing what I know about what's going on over there, that is more likely the case. Chuck, question: is there hunger in Israel? Not really. I think you'd be hard pressed to find Israelis who are going hungry. Christina Mina says, by the way, Roni, I've seen those commercials too. Give $20 can feed an Israeli family. And I'm like, I've never seen an Israel. I mean, there are some that are wealthier and some that are not, but I've never seen an Israeli family that's as poor as people on my street in West Virginia, or people that live where I do in Panama. So, um, and the government here does have programs for people that are poor. Now, there are a few homeless that wander around and stuff like that, but that's more of a mental illness issue. But yeah, that good question. Christina Mina says, could you explain who the settlers are and why they're a controversy on them settling in your upcoming video? It's a confusing topic. Yeah, I can do that. But let's do that on the next video. Are there any Christian churches we could attend services in Jerusalem? Absolutely. I mean, there's tons of Christian churches here. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, for example, is a Christian church. There's an Armenian Christian church in the Old City. But if you're talking about evangelical Christian or kind of a more modern Christian, yes. As a matter of fact, right down the road that way is the church that all the CBN staff, or many of the CBN staff, go to. And it's a great church. There's plenty of them. So if you're coming over, just send me a message and I'll send you a recommendation. Johnny D says, did you see the UK shipped in 18,500 Afghans today? No, I didn't see that, but I have been meaning to get to the story that's going on about Iran kicking out 250,000 Afghans over the last 2 weeks. Iran is absolutely ridding itself of the Afghans in its country and sending them back into Afghanistan, which is very interesting just to watch. It's just a very remarkable thing. And there's a lot of human suffering going on in those migration flows, without a doubt. Those things are not good in Afghanistan, as you can imagine. Guns Blazing 762 says, what's your opinion on getting all the Gazans out of Gaza and Israel taking over? I don't think it's really likely. I don't think it's really feasible to move all the Gazans out. I think it is feasible to let as many that want to leave, as long as they can negotiate someplace for them to go. And that's the problem. However, yesterday, the French Parliament passed a law that said that every Gazan has the right to settle in France. So there's that. France may regret that, but they did pass that law. So there are places that Gazans could go. That's part of what the IDF is trying to set up with this humanitarian city that they're building down in Rafah, is build a gated community, vet the people coming in, provide for them while they're there, don't let them leave. And then the only way out of that humanitarian city is to go to another country. And they will facilitate that through Israel to get them out to whatever country they can go to. So that I definitely support. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu is right when he says the people of Gaza should have the choice to leave if they want to. But we should also have the choice to tell them they can't come here. And so they need to find a place that will take them. Trey asks, why didn't Israel have an issue with Pakistan developing nuclear weapons in the 90s like they did with Iraq and Syria? It's a really good question, Trey. And I am not well versed enough on the history of the nuclear program in Pakistan to do that. I want to say that at one point the Pacs were actually an ally, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. All right, we're over time, so that's all the questions I got time for today. Thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone. I appreciate all of you. Please make sure that you go to chuckholton.com and you can become a supporter over there and get lots of extra stuff and face-to-face Zoom calls with me, and you can get to know me and my family a little bit better. You get first dibs on our tours and our trips that we take if you're a supporter over there. So I highly recommend it. Go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter today. So also make sure you hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you like more content like this. We're going to try to get back to doing the condensed versions of these lives. I just have not had time to do it. I've been too busy since I've been over here. Vicky asks, are IDF soldiers' families being cared for by Israel? Not as well as they could be, but they're okay. There are organizations or foundations or charities that are set up to specifically help IDF soldiers' families. And if you just Google that, I'm sure you can find a bunch of them and go help them. I know the Israel guys up in at Hayovel, they have serveisrael.com, and they try to help reservists and the citizens of Israel that live in Judea and Samaria to get the equipment and stuff they need to be able to protect themselves while they're out there. And that's a good cause as well. So, all right. Thank you very much for watching.